this is the time. It's now that we have this opportunity to get a grip of our anxiety, our stress, and our fear.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Maritza Barone. In this show, I will introduce you to ideas, concepts, and mindsets that will open your mind to a new world of well-being and personal life growth. Through eye-opening interviews, we elevate people in the world doing amazing things for humanity and share insights that will shift you to become the happiest, healthiest, kindest, and most compassionate version of you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Things You Can't Unhear. I hope you're all staying well and looking after yourselves. I've decided to drop another episode this week rather than wait until Monday, which is when I usually release new episodes, as I really want to do my part to help people around this time of significant uncertainty around the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Over the last few days, I've received phone calls from family and friends who are experiencing anxiousness, worry, and unknown feelings they have never had to deal with before. They're imagining symptoms, they're worried about a runny nose, they're unsure about their finances, they're concerned about their kids, their health, their family's health. The list goes on. And the truth is, none of us are unaffected by this right now. And what we need are tools that will help calm our stress and our panic. Methods to stay present, mindful, compassionate, and importantly, calm. And to do this, I've invited Marike Knight on the show. Marike is a teacher of mindfulness and founder of Cool, Calmer, Collected, a business that facilitates programs in mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindful leadership, resilience and well-being, raising awareness and emotional intelligence, and mindful communication. So I thought she'd be a great person for us to hear from right now. Marike truly believes in the transformative power of mindfulness and is one of the few qualified practitioners around Australia delivering the most renowned evidence-based stress reduction program in the world. Her mission is to improve lives by teaching individuals and organisations to live with presence and have complete access to all the tools they need to do that.
Thank you, Marike, for being on the show. What a time to be alive, hey? It is
full on, isn't it?
Absolutely crazy. And, you know, I'm talking to the right person, I believe, right now, because as a teacher of mindfulness, you can really give us a lot of useful tools in these fearful and these uncertain times that we're all facing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. The more I kind of am seeing everything unfold, the more I want to just be out talking to people and just giving them these wonderful tools that, you know, in some way are going to help to navigate this uncertainty and this anxiety and the stress that we're facing into at the moment. So yeah, it does feel very like a very relevant kind of thing to be doing. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So as a mindfulness teacher, what is the definition of mindfulness? I mean, I've heard you say it's the ability to pay attention to the present moment non-judgmentally, right? So what does that do for us?
Okay, so I mean, it might be good just to put it in the context of like what we're going through at the moment.
Yeah.
So what you've got to see mindfulness training like is like going to the gym and doing some weight training. We're strengthening our capacity for resilience and to manage better with difficult times. So when we see that definition of paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally, what that means is that we're trying to stay in the present moment. And right now, that's a really difficult thing because we are getting very quickly into the future and going, well, what if? And, you know, just all of those kind of the scary, you know, fears that we create, that all happens in the future. And what mindfulness training does is help us to stay more present with what's happening right here now. And what that does, or how that helps us, is to actually just being in the present moment. We are much more inclined to not be in a reactive or stressed state. Our parasympathetic system is more likely to be activated. And yeah, so I guess that's part of it. The non-judgmental part is also a really important part of what we're doing here, because as you'll notice, and we were just chatting about that before we came online, we are very apt to constantly deeming things pleasant, unpleasant, don't like. But at the moment, we're in a real experience of, I don't like any of this. I'm really uncomfortable with all of this. And what mindfulness training helps us to do is get just a bit more curious about our very habitual reactions to uncomfortable situations. So again, that's just helping us to build resilience in the face of situations like this.
Absolutely. Resilience is key, and staying present, because right now a lot of us are okay. We are traveling well. So being in that mindset where we currently are well and focusing on that is really important. I agree. But we were living in quite stressful times before all of this hit, and mental health was already a big issue in a lot of society. What are your fears at the moment with mental health, and where you see it going for people?
Oh yeah, and that it's a hard one, Marissa, because I think we were incredibly already in kind of like a mental health crisis, and so I am very worried, just even in the way that we've been living, because we are much more inclined to be socially isolated. I think the fact that mindfulness is becoming so popular is because we don't have resilience, and part of that is because we've had a lot of comfort. Like we've never had to face into a situation where we've had food scarcity, or we've had, as a whole population, obviously there's parts of our country that do suffer that, but as a whole we've never really faced into this. So it's interesting in that we then have additional stresses, and the stresses are things that aren't actually threats, like their expectations on self, it's time, it's financial and status, it's all these things that all of a sudden aren't actually all that important. If you notice, consumer behaviors are really changing. So I guess the way I'm seeing it a little is twofold. One, I'm really deeply concerned, and I feel like we need to really be practicing mindfulness more than ever, and practicing tools to help us regulate our stress reaction in the face of this.
Yeah.
But the silver lining could be that my experience, and I've had a lot of adversity in my life, is that sometimes when we met with these kind of challenging situations, our hand is forced a little bit. So potentially, if we handle this correctly, this could actually be the thing that we need to start to navigate out of mental health crisis, and start to focus on our well-being, to focus on these things, for organizations to put it first, for us to put it first. So I guess I'm trying to have that hopeful side too, that maybe this depth of adversity is actually going to be the catalyst for some great change for us.
You're right. I mean, so many people use, difficult experiences in their lives to help them to grow. And if we can try and look at that in that way, I think there was a shift looming for society in a more positive way. And this has just given us a big push to look at the way that we are living, to look at the way that we are interacting with people, to look at our compassion, to look at our kindness, to look at the way we work. We are all questioning all of that right now. We're all looking at new ways to survive and look at our lifestyle in all different elements, at home, at work. What does it look like? Like, what does it look like for all of us to think differently? And I think we need to use this time. It's a great time for us to be doing this. I mean, we have no choice either.
That's it. And it's so interesting, because so much of mindfulness, or so much of what I teach about mindfulness, is getting out of that habitual autopiloted state, and to take pauses and actually reassess, and to kind of move forward from a more creative response. And we now have this like unique opportunity to kind of we're actually having to hit the pause button. And so from there, we are going to be able to reassess, certain things if we actually manage our anxieties. Now, that's the problem. At the moment, we're still kind of in that default mode. And so there's a real tendency to just be constantly hitting the refresh feed of, our news, and to be feeding into like the fear, and to be, spinning out of control. And that's where we need to focus our efforts right now, is how do we just kind of just take a collective breath out and get really grounded in the face of this. We are going to be okay. It's going to be okay, in the broader sense of things. How are we going to actually choose to move forward from this, or move into this?
Taking that breath, when you said that, I stopped and I took a big breath, and it's so important because it dropped my anxiety a few levels instantly. And breath is such a powerful way for us to do that very quickly. And I know you work with breath a lot in your practice. How can we just incorporate this really quickly, say for people who have never done it before?
That's it. And it is so simple. It's as simple as taking that deep breath. Because what we know about those, even just 3 deep breaths like that, is it starts to recalibrate our nervous system response. And at the moment, we're very much in fight flight, and understandably so, because there is so much uncertainty. But we have this unique ability as humans to be able to actually have top-down executive functioning. We have a CEO brain that, if we're accessing, it is capable of actually deciding or deciphering what stress we need in any given moment, or how we should be utilizing this stuff. So taking 3 deep breaths can be enough to just kind of, as you said, you just noticed a bit of a change.
Yeah,
some other
the
things
shoulders
just
drop, and you just
relief.
Yeah,
you just kind of ground. You just come back to like, what's here now, because what's here now is actually the only thing we can control, is this breath, this moment. That's all we have. We can't control what's going to happen tomorrow, even in an hour right now. So that sense of just taking that deep collective kind of sigh out, particularly when we're focusing on the exhalation, it's kind of just a surrendering into, I'm here, and this is the situation I've got at hand right in this moment.
A lot of us are forced to make some difficult decisions at the moment. Like as a mum myself, I'm trying to decide whether to keep my kids at school or pull them out. Business owners are trying to figure out whether to keep their doors open and continue to pay their staff. I mean, there's endless decisions that we're all forced to make at the moment that none of us have had to make before. And I mean, it's tricky for all of us to sort of change our mindset around that. But when we look at the news headlines, I mean, I'm not a big news watcher, but I have been, of course, switching it on, maybe reading it more so than switching on the big news headlines, because they can really spiral me into a bit of anxiety. But I have been watching the news, and I do get a big sense of panic when I do watch it. So I'm trying to avoid over reading and over watching, but also I want to bring up the conversation about trust with these headlines as well, because there's so many conspiracies and people, sharing incorrect information. What's your take on us trusting these sources and trusting the information that we hear?
Yeah, and look, I think it's twofold to what you're saying. I think the idea that when we are reading the headlines, like it is, we are actually operating from a more prehistoric part of our brain, and that part of the brain is, just it's old. It's like it's in survival mode. But what we do need to remember is we've also got this more evolved part of our brain. And if we're able to bring that online, we are able to kind of calm our system and calm that thinking that, can get us into that spiral. And I think, that's where we can also meet trust. It's going to come from that prefrontal cortex, that recognition, or from that, the more evolved part of our brain, that recognition that, well, lots of recognitions, but one, when it comes to kind of trusting our government, I think with this information age where we just have that ability to just be fact checking and doing everything ourselves and relying on ourselves, it's much harder to trust in this instance. And so I guess, yeah, like I was saying to you earlier, like I think the invitation is that we actually kind of surrender a little bit and trust the authorities around this, just thinking that they're doing the very best they can, which isn't easy, is it? You know,
Oh God, I don't envy where they're at or what position they're in at all. Could be incredibly difficult.
And I think because also we're such a global, world, and we just can be reading information from everywhere. And I was talking to another leader the other day about the fact that what we're really facing into is this infodemic. Like, it's just that there's too much information, and if we pulled back a little bit on researching and knowing everything about it, then maybe we'd have more tendency to trust the people that are making the decisions for us in every particular country. But then also, just I guess the deeper trust is the broader perspective of things, like the trust that we will get through this, and that there will be silver lining, and that there are ways that we're going to survive and thrive as a species as a result of this. Like, and that's a very difficult trust, but again, it's something that can bring a bit of ease, to be honest.
Before we got online, we were talking about how long we thought this would all take and how we can get back to our normal lives. And I don't know. Is it ever going to be back to that normalcy? Like, I'm sure it is, but a lot of us will change in that time and have learned to adapt to new things. So it's just, we're just so uncertain, and there's just so much fear going on. And I want to get your take on how we really pull back from that fear using your mindfulness techniques that you use in your work, and how we really give ourselves some of these tools to take the right actions to pull back from that fear. I read a quote before. It's the acronym for fear can be forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Very cheesy.
Yes.
Tom Bellew shared it, but it's true, right?
To be honest, the whole reason I got onto my mindfulness journey, or part of it, but a huge part of it was in the suicide of my father. And I had a very real choice in that moment to either, totally just like go the direction of just run away from it, ignore it, do all of the things and just like get on with it, or keep myself busy, or any of the things that, I could have done, or face into it, and really kind of meet all of the complexities of the pain, the uncertainty and all that. And I did, and I used the tools, and that's really what's known as psychological thriving, or this ability to meet the adversity. One of my teachers at Brown University, he talks about this idea that, when we meet discomfort and unpleasantness, which obviously this is a really uncomfortable kind of time for all of us, it's like being in a car and, traversing a road with black ice. And we obviously as Australians don't really know what it's like to get into a skid like that. But I've been in a few skids before where, the car's kind of spun out. And our tendency can be to kind of pull the wheel out of the, in the opposite direction, because we're so fearful that we're skidding out. And yet really when we're doing that, when we're turning against it and using all of our force to kind of, turn against that, it's quite ineffective. Yet if we were to just turn a little bit towards the skid, everything wants to right itself, like the velocity and the vehicle wants to kind of ride us out of the skid. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for what we're facing into right now. Like, we actually need to face into the uncertainty. We need to face into the idea that we don't know whether it's a 14-day quarantine, whether it's going to be a 3-month thing, like what actually it's going to look like on the other side of this. If we turn into that a little bit, I think we might be more prepared to come out the other end in a more, I guess, healthy way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Lean into it and accept what is, I suppose.
Yes.
Look, the likelihood of us being quarantined at home for 2 weeks is highly likely at the moment. And you know what? We could be using this time to really help us grow. What are some ideas that you have that would be good for us to do in this time where we potentially at home?
Well, I guess it's just the perfect time to really be practicing being as present as we can with our loved ones. Like, how often, so the first thing can be just in reframing, really seeing this as you say, an opportunity to focus on our health and our well-being, on just, not being so busy and out there constantly doing, but just coming home to ourselves and coming home to our house, So I guess some of the really, really simple things is, one, just making a discipline out of being present and noticing when the mind gets kind of caught up in the fear. And I say that as it's an easy thing, but I know it's not easy, because we mind wander so often. Like, we have about 90,000 thoughts a day. So, it's very easy for us to get into one of those thoughts. But the invitation with mindfulness is to kind of notice that thinking, but then just come back to what's here right now. And what's here right now is our breathing, it's our body, it's, senses. So it's sight, sound, taste, touch. It's listening to a loved one and actually really listening in. So we've got all of these kind of anchors that can help us to keep grounded. So I guess the very first thing I would suggest is noticing when your thinking is getting kind of into that place of, worry and fear and anxiety and uncertainty, and use an anchor. Find a couple of them. Maybe the first one is feeling your feet flat on the floor and just going, I'm grounded. Maybe it's putting a hand on your chest and saying, just, I'm here, come home, So simple little practices like that can be really helpful. Also, just being, and I've been talking about this a lot, we need to tune into the stress in our body. And that can feel uncomfortable, but if we don't know it's there, if we're just operating in our thoughts and just kind of carrying on, we don't know how much damage it's doing to our system. And right now, the most important thing we can do is be keeping our systems really healthy. And so if we keep paying attention to the stress reactions in our body, that might be beating heart, tension in our shoulders, faster breathing, just that restlessness, or just a sense of kind of frozenness. If we feel into that, we're actually already changing a brain response, and we're probably more capable of, it's like shifting the gear, where we're capable of shifting the gear out of that stress reaction.
It's like the news headlines are doing more damage than the actual illness itself at the moment, right? Like,
Definitely.
The fear is doing more damage than the illness.
Honestly, I keep talking about this. I feel like at the moment it's just as much a pandemic of fear and anxiety as it is of the illness. And that's the one thing, that's the beautiful thing we can actually get a check over. We can't change the illness. And in Buddhist terms, they talk about the first arrow and the second arrow. So they say, if you get hit by that first arrow, so say, this is a very old term, because obviously there were bows and arrows back in this, mythology. But if we get hit by that first arrow and then we get hit by a second arrow, will it hurt any less? And what it's basically saying is, like, you're always going to have the hurt from the first arrow, but all of the other hurts that we're inflicting ourselves, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth arrows, they're the things that we can mitigate. So, let's just stick with what is really actually happening right now, which is that there is a virus that is new and we don't know a lot about it, and we do need to kind of try and contain it and slow it down so that the medical system isn't overloaded. But that's it. That's where we could potentially stop. And if we did, maybe there wouldn't be food scarcity and there wouldn't be all the other things that we're doing to contribute to more hysteria.
I want to talk about the food scarcity, actually, and the panic buying and all of those actions that people are out there, doing right now to look after their own unit, their own people, their own small family. We can use this time to be compassionate and kind, but we are drawn to obviously protect the ones that mean the most to us. Are we being selfish by doing that? Are we do we need to open ourselves up more to others? I mean, I'm a very compassionate person. So it's not in my nature to go out there and empty the shelves and put it all in my own home. But at the same time, I need to feed my kids. So where do we
just
sit here?
notice that, and there's that tendency. And I think what we do need to do is hold a lot of compassion for everyone in this instance, because then there's that tendency for us to go, oh, well, I wouldn't do that, but I need to feed my kids.
Yeah,
and I just,
we're all
noticed
in the same boat.
We're
right?
all in the same boat. And it's a really unsettling thing to go into the supermarket and see the shelves bare. And so then the instant thing, which is just a survival technique in our, like, as old as our whole system, is to go, oh shit, there's no food. How am I going to feed my family? And so we clock into that kind of more prehistoric brain. And the reality is, and what the supermarkets have been saying is, if everyone just continued their same pattern of buying, we'd have the food. But this is this thing that we're in this survival mode. So I guess, yes, the invitation with that kind of compassion piece in this place is, how do we kind of stop, get grounded, and come into that a part of our brain that's going to be more capable of seeing us all in this, as opposed to just our small little family. And that's not easy, is it? Because again, there's some great books out there, Johann Hari, that talks about lost connections. We've been moving more and more towards these kind of very small little family units for a really long time. So it's hard for us to grasp that we're all in this together. But if we could see all Melburnians as part of the same tribe, and if we really felt that, we would be probably choosing to not put so many rolls of toilet paper in our supermarket, trolley. We'd probably be going, but what about the people that are going to miss out, as opposed to just thinking about like the 4 people that are in our unit and going more, because we don't know how long this is going to go. So it's about how we can broaden our perspective on who's in our inn, which is pretty much the whole of humanity in this instance.
Look, it's funny you say that. I am sitting in a room. We're not in front of each other, for everyone listening, because it's easier to do it via Zoom right now, and that social distance is being promoted so much. But right in front of me, I have a world map, and I can't help but keep looking up at it because it just proves to me right now that we are really all in this together. And this hasn't really happened in my lifetime at all, where the entire world is in something together, whether there's a drought in Africa or, poverty all over the world in certain places. We've never been in something together in my lifetime. And it sort of feels nice in a way that we're all coming together. We are in a boat together.
We're in a boat together. Yeah, we are all in this. And I think when we have that mentality, if you think about it, and I keep talking about this prehistoric brain, we're hardwired for both compassion and for that judgment piece of having people in our other, and also for having, compassion for all. And I think just right now we need to be focusing on strengthening that piece around compassion, because we're not going to do this individually on our own. We can't. Even if we stock all of the toilet paper in the world in our homes and have all of the food in the world, we can't do this on our own anymore, because we've become a global world. So, it seems kind of irrational to be just thinking about just the food for now, when we've just got this much broader kind of fight that we've got on our hands. So yeah, I know, I feel quite inspired by the fact that that China's sending doctors over to Italy, that, there's going to be this shared kind of way of us kind of managing together. Feels, positive.
Seeing humanity as one rather than separate is, it's an interesting and beautiful thought for a change, I think.
And, one really simple tool that we can use daily, that I use as a bit of it's like a brain training kind of activity, is because it's easy for us to talk about this, isn't it? But then when you get out there into the supermarket, it's not easy. So one is just a really simple practice where you take one breath before you see every single person. And this might just be someone on the street that you don't know. It could be the person at your coffee shop. It could be the person who you and them are just about to choose the last roll of toilet paper. But just take one breath and find one similarity. So when we find similarity in someone other than, instead of judgment, we're more inclined to bring online that kind of empathy part of our brain. So we take one breath, we find one similarity, and that similarity might be, they're scared too. Just like me, they're scared too. Or just like me, they're uncertain. Or just like me, they don't know when they're going to get toilet paper next, you know? So just finding a similarity in any way, and then wishing them well, or wishing them to feel easeful and healthy in this time. And a really significant thing will happen if we start to practice that on a daily, on a moment by moment basis, and smile at people, because it starts to just kind of widen our sphere of who's in our in. We start to see that everyone is in the same boat, and that's essential right now.
And looking them right in the eye and connecting with them, I think, is key as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you work with people all the time to do these types of things. So a lot about this podcast is having that conversation and always opening up discussions. It's all what things you can't unhear is about. But I also love to leave people with some tools, some really tangible tools to walk away with feeling lighter at the end of these episodes. And yeah, I'd love to get some tangible tools from you, and maybe some really great advice on what we can walk away after this chat doing for ourselves. Sorry to throw you in the deep end here, but I know you do this every single day, and you've got so many things up your sleeve that you do with your clients and in your own personal life. So I'm sure you've got so many to share with us today as well.
Okay, so how about we do top 5? Should we do the top 5?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the first one is this awareness of putting on our own safety mask first. Our well-being is the most important. Even in our family, we need to be taking care of ourselves. So even if you're feeling that sense of overload, I've been doing these questions on Instagram, give us one word, and quite a few mums have just said, I'm overloaded. There's just so much stress. So the first thing is to just be putting self-care first. And they're simple things. 1 is taking deep breaths. 2, it might be getting out in fresh air, getting sleep, drinking water, like all these simple but not so simple things that we can just manage. And also on top of that is just symbolically setting down our stress. So, a good way to explain the stress and its impact on our body is to think about a glass of water. So right now I'm in front of you and we're looking at videos, but I'm holding up a glass of water. And if I was to ask you how heavy that glass of water, how heavy do you think it would be?
200 grams, 500 grams.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's heavy, but it's not that heavy. It's heavy, but I can handle it, because what I'm doing is I'm picking it up, I'm taking a drink, and I'm putting it down. So that's how our stress system wants to work. It wants to pick up something that's kind of heavy and then put it down after a while. Now, if I was to hold this glass for the whole time that you and I are talking, things would start to get a little bit hairy for me. My bicep would start to hurt. My shoulder would start to hurt. This would start feeling a lot heavier. And that's kind of like our stresses. If we just carry all of these worries and concerns throughout our whole day, it starts to get really overloaded on our system. So we've got to put it down. If I was to hold this glass for 24 hours straight, I'd need to go to hospital. And I don't want to go to hospital right now because the hospital's already overloaded. So that symbolic idea of us constantly putting down a stress, you're going to have lots of worries. At the moment, I've lost a lot of work. My husband and I are heavily invested in the share market. There is significant burdens of worry, but what I have to keep reminding myself is set it down. I can pick up those worries in 24 hours, but right now, what good are they, other than burdening my system? So if you can find, and symbolically it might be putting your phone on airline mode or airplane mode. Symbolically it might be when you get home, when you put your keys or your phone on the table, you go, I'm setting down the day, I'm setting down my stresses, I'm going to be with my family. So it's this kind of way of looking after ourselves mentally to just lessen that load a bit. So that's kind of number 1. So number 1 is just taking care of ourselves and lessening that psychological load. Yeah. whatever we can do. So even right now, while you're listening, just think, what's one way that I can symbolically put it down?
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes so much simple sense, doesn't it? Just leave that there for now. It doesn't need to be in my thoughts constantly. Leave that there for now. Yeah.
There's actually a really great app, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's like something like the Worryometer or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can actually put all your worries into it, and it will give you a notification in 48 hours or whatever to pick them up again. Usually by then, so it's kind of this like symbolic, like, here, I'll put my worry somewhere. But right now, like, we're so uncertain, we can't, what are we going to do with them? Just psychologically sit there and ruminate over them? It's kind of not a good thing for us.
I like the fact that we're consciously doing it, not just numbing it with alcohol or something like that. It's a conscious putting down of a worry, not a like, let's just drink it away type.
Yeah, it's not just being over positive. It's not numbing out. It's not being in denial. This is us going, it's here. It's a heavy load. Right now, I've got to do everything in my power to look after my own health and well-being. So I'm setting it down. I think it's key. And this is a very useful tool for us mothers and everyone and fathers in life. So what a fantastic opportunity to be practicing it, because it's really prevalent right now. But like, when we come out the other end of this, we're going to be so much more hardy to the face of any little stresses. We'll be like, oh, I'm setting that down. Like, that's not necessary right now. Yeah. So just think about the actual strengthening we're doing every time we do that. And I'm not saying that you'll set it down and you won't unconsciously pick it up again, but the invitation is to continually put it down, put it down, put it down. Just, it's up again, put it down, up again, down. It's like, and that
watch
is actually
that thing right there.
Yeah, seriously. So as much as you can kind of just visualize it like that, that can be really helpful.
So that's number one.
That's number one. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great start.
Okay, good. So then number two is actually all of the things we can do to invoke our parasympathetic nervous system. Now, that's something we can do with our family too. So there's heaps of great little techniques, hacks, tips, all sorts of things that we can be doing to and when I say nervous system and parasympathetic, for those of you who aren't familiar with those words, so there's the fight, flight system in our body, which prepares us for survival, which is amazing. And then there's the rest digest function. And what we want to do, if you visualize two kids on a seesaw, two little 5-year-olds on a seesaw, the stress response would come up and the rest and digest would go down, and then vice versa, and they just go nicely on that seesaw. At the moment, we've got two sumo wrestlers on that seesaw.
I love your analogies.
But it's so, and the seesaw will work, but the seesaw will break a lot quicker. So we need to kind of be finding these ways to kind of have that seesaw more operational. And the way we do that is by invoking the nervous system, the parasympathetic more. So a couple of ways that you can do that is to do some breathing activities with your family and yourself. So you might just even breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4. So in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. It's a really simple one. Another one, which is known as the relaxing breath, is breathing in for 4, holding for 7, breathing out for 8. So the holding is a really important part of, also evoking the parasympathetic. So they're two very simple breathing techniques that you could be doing with your family. You might do like them for a round of 10 or 15 or 20. Grounding techniques. So going outside and, just being in nature. We know that green and nature has a profound way of invoking our parasympathetic nervous system. So fresh air and green, going to a park. It's now being prescribed. It's a social prescription to prescribe the park for people who are stressed. So going and taking your shoes off and being in the grass, in the sand, in the water, things that are just nature are definitely going to bring our parasympathetic nervous system into kind of operation.
That works. I did that yesterday afternoon, and I felt 1,000 times better. Picked the kids up from school, walked over to the park. The sun was shining, the shoes were off. We ran around on the grass and just enjoyed nature for an hour, and
Yeah.
that made a massive difference in my mindset.
And look, we've got to really think about that even when we're going into lockdown. It doesn't mean locking our houses and being all insular, like be out. We need fresh air. Oxygen is going to help fight this virus. Like fresh air is important. We can be at the beach. And you just made the next beautiful point around being together. So that's another massive parasympathetic, evoker, is actually being with family or connecting with loved ones, connecting with community, because that also helps us to feel better. We don't want to sit there and get all hysterical together. That's not going to help. But to sit together and share how we're feeling and to talk about other things, to keep our mind off things, to play games. My husband and I have just started playing some random board games at night.
Don't play Monopoly. That causes fights.
Yeah, I don't go near Monopoly. He's a banker. I can't do Monopoly with him.
My husband's in property. We always argue.
Yeah, seriously. I just know. Definitely not. Much prefer backgammon or cards or something.
No, I love the idea of board games. I think they're great.
Yeah.
Thing.
Or soccer, or just things that are, and hugs. And I know that goes against the social isolating, but in our family, hugs and eye contact and things, they all play a part in just bringing down that stress response and activating the rest and digest. So
beautiful.
I guess, and one other little technique that you can use particularly with kids and or anyone who's feeling really anxious is you do the 5 senses. So you look around at 5 things that you can see and you label them. So it might be, at the moment I'm looking at tree, sky, chair, plant. Then you listen for 4 things that you can hear, 4 different things that you can hear. Then 3 things you can touch. So you might put your hand on the chair, smooth surface of the table, ratany chair, soft leggings. And then taste, like 2 things you can taste, and it might be, I can taste my Vegemite toast, and and then 1 deep breath, and that's also just another grounding technique that's going to bring us into the parasympathetic. So there's a whole
useful, wonderful, simple techniques, and that forces our minds to just switch off from the chatter. Yes,
exactly. So basically it does that, but also in terms of the body, it's just evoking, it's helping us with immunity. If we're in stress, we are so much more likely to be unable to really be in good health, and our immune system is compromised. Whereas if we're in that rest digest, it's helping us with immunity. So tip 1 was self-care and setting down the psychological load. Tip 2 is actual just little daily hacks, micro practices that are going to evoke the parasympathetic system. Yep. Okay, so number 3 is all around connecting with loved ones and people in the world, and it's the one that we kind of just used before, which is the just like me practice, because everyone's stressed out right now, and I think it's really easy for us to get into other mode. Like we can be like annoyed at the government, we can be annoyed at our kids, we can be annoyed at a lot of people right now just because it's a stressful time and we're more likely to react. So if we can do that practice constantly of taking a breath, recognizing the similarities. So just like me, they are feeling afraid, just like me. They want this to go away, just like me. And then just sending or wishing well, that can be a really valuable tool to use daily.
There's a really beautiful meditation on Mind Valley by Vishen Lakhiani. It's the 6-phase meditation. Have you heard of that or used that before?
No.
It's beautiful at visualizing love for communities and well-being and health and wellness for everyone, starting from inside yourself, then inside your home, then inside your suburb, then inside your town, then inside your country, then inside, and it just spreads and spreads, and you visualize love and health and all of those wonderful things and positivity for everyone around the world. And because we are socially distanced right now, I think that's such a beautiful way to do it. So if anyone wants to look that up, it's called a 6-phase meditation, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and look, and so that sounds to me a lot like a loving kindness or meditation. And there's, if you could jump on Insight Timer, I've got one on my Insight Timer, and visualizing a big open smile around the whole world, like this open, receptive, warm, beautiful smile, and you smile that smile out to all of the community, and the whole world. And there's something. So what we know about that kind of compassion and loving kindness meditations is they're one of the best antidotes to the stress response. So and that sense of anxiousness and uncertainty. And I was talking about this a lot when the bushfires were, the major thing, and eco anxiety. It's been a 2020. Yeah. There's some great memes around 2020 at the moment, but so I think that sending loving kindness and then also just connecting in, like Zoom is we're on Zoom at the moment, and it feels really lovely, because if we are in social isolation, we shouldn't be just, there is that tendency for us to kind of become more insular. Why don't we just have little community gatherings with friends and, play games? Like, I don't know what we could play online, but, let's get creative with how we can stay connected with our community, because I think that's very important for us, our health and well-being.
So much so. I mean, I was tempted to turn the video off when we were starting this discussion, and I'm so glad you told me you'd really like to see me. And the reason why I wanted to turn it off was obviously just for better internet connection, so you guys can get better sound. But we are connecting. We are looking at each other right in the eye. We're very close to each other in this capacity, and it feels good. It feels like you're right here. I mean, almost.
It does.
But it's definitely, we have to use this as an option, I think, for now.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, the other day I just ran a online Zoom session for anyone who wanted to join in. I had all these strangers online, and we just connected in the most beautiful way. And so I think, we have to make do with the wonderful resources that we actually have, that we can start to use. So that's number 3. Okay, so number 4 is meditation, mindfulness, of course. Like, if we think about this as the upgrade to the hardware of our brain, that needs the upgrade, because we aren't I guess equipped at the moment to be dealing with this level of uncertainty because we haven't had it. Mindfulness is just such a wonderful way to just strengthen the neural pathways of our brain to be in that prefrontal space, which we know is so essential. So there's going to be so much free stuff online. For instance, follow me. I'm going to be running free, sessions. I'll be doing Instagram videos daily, just whatever we can do to help, you navigate this. So mindfulness is just such an important practice. And it can look like formal seated practice, which can feel really uncomfortable some. And that's just like the heavy lifting of, brain training. But then it starts to become, something that you can do in every moment of your life. It's when you're washing your hands, every time you're washing your hands, you can, add mindfulness to it by just feeling the sensation of the water, not being in your head and thinking about, the parasites or anything else or the next thing you've got to get done, but just being with the water, the cool water on your hands, the slipperiness of the soap, the texture of all of your hands and, the wrinkles on your hands, and, just really being present with your daily activities is also a mindfulness practice.
So are you sharing some further techniques on your pages, on your...
So I'll be doing probably like every couple of days a Zoom session that, we can have as many people as want to come to sit and just to do a practice. And that will include a practice and then a general discussion. So it's a beautiful opportunity for us to connect in as, random strangers, but again, to feel that sense of like, we're all in this together, which can feel very comforting at a time like now. And then every day I'm posting little, like, just ways to reset our mindset on some of this, which can be really useful as well. Yeah.
Okay. And that's Cool, Calmer, Collected.
Cool, Calmer, Collected. That's correct. Yes.
Beautiful.
Cool, keeping you cool, calm, and collected during this terrible time.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So
right,
I guess
that's
tip number 4. So we've got tip number 5, and I would say tip number 5 is info overload.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think we've got to get really, really, really discerning with how much we're taking in. I think sleep hygiene, phones out of the bedroom. And I've got to do this too. You know, I've noticed the last couple of nights when I've had the phone, the first thing I've done is pick up and seen what's happening in America, what's happening with the share market. And instantly, before I've even gotten out of bed, my heart rate and my anxiety levels are through the roof. Now, does that feel like a sensible way to start the day?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No.
And, you know, if we think about the Spanish flu in 1700s, do you think we were starting the day like that? No, you're starting the day as normal. And there's something really beautiful about waking up and just knowing I'm still breathing, life is still fine. But when we buy into that, social media and the news and the constantly being on, it's just not going to do any of us any good. So I guess the invitation is to start to think about how you can minimize the level that you're taking in. So it could be that you don't have your phone in your room at nighttime, that you give yourself a full 8-10 hours offline. Throughout the day, it might be just like having set times where you're on airplane mode, because we do have that tendency to just pick up and want to see those notifications, but turn off your notifications. Don't have the BBC notification. It's all red. You notice how all the news flashes are red? Mm-hmm. Already, just prehistorically in our kind of epigenetics, red makes us stress without even reading anything. So if we can just turn off those notifications and have a little bit more choice over when we choose to read the news, and maybe just allow yourself certain moments to kind of sit down and read them, and then have straight away some practices that you instigate straight after to reground. Because if we start the day in anxiety and then we're off, just think about those 2 sumo wrestlers on that seesaw. We're going to break that seesaw pretty quickly. So we have to think about how we can lift that anxiety a little bit.
Yeah,
so
I
that's
totally agree. Limit the amount you're spending, limit the amount of time you're spending on these things, and choose your news sources that feel right for you, that feel good to you.
Yeah. And that is like, and I think even the newspapers, they are still buying into the fear. And so I just am only looking at World Health Organization. I'm looking at John Hopkins. I'm looking at a really great publication that's come out of the Boston Globe called STAT, which is all just very medical. And all of those, they don't invoke as much fear as when I jump onto the Age or the Herald Sun. So if you want to stay informed with up-to-date things that are going on with this, choose the source that those newspapers are going to, so that you're not seeing it through 5 different lenses of reactivity. So you're just seeing it through your own, which is bad enough.
Well, language is a huge way to really ignite the way we perceive something. So the language that tends to be used in these major news platforms is incredibly fearful. So I totally agree with you to, go to those sources where the language is used is educational and
just non-biased.
And non-biased. Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought it was quite funny on the Herald Sun, on not funny, nothing's funny about this, but to see that front page with like, buy 2 weeks worth of food, and then on the next page, don't panic. And it's like, Jesus, what have you done here? Yeah, very confused. That whole so to even be seeing that when you go into your coffee shop as the first thing, that's where I saw it, because I don't like to read that kind of news, but you see it everywhere. And I just think let's just be really discerning with it. And I think if we do that, then maybe these papers might get the message that it's not actually what we want to hear right now. How can we sway the way that they are going to report on this stuff too, by not buying into their stuff?
You've been so helpful, Marike, and I just want to ask you this final question. If you had the front page of the newspaper and you could say anything you wanted to say to everyone in Australia, what would it be right now? What is a couple of sentences that you would leave us with?
I would probably use the Viktor Frankl quote. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who lived through the Holocaust. So he saw adversity that we can't even begin to understand. He saw his whole family murdered in front of him, and he was in a concentration camp. And he said, when we're no longer able to change our situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. This is the time. It's now, that we have this beautiful opportunity to get a grip of our anxiety, our stress, and our fear. And let's be honest, this hasn't just been happening around COVID. This has been a growing thing that's been going on for us for a really long time. And now we have this kind of very real threat that gives us this opportunity. We're challenged to change ourselves. So if I had the kind of the ability to be promoting one thing, it'd be like, let's just face into this together. It's not comfortable, it's not easy, but we have to just meet this with a different response to what we've been doing. And by doing that, we're going to be just building such beautiful resiliency and ways of operating in the future, because we're facing into climate change. This is just the beginning of us needing to kind of adapt as a species. This is the time to adapt. This is our time.
I'm Maritza Barone. Thank you for listening to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'd love to keep the conversation going. Let us know what you thought of this episode, and if something really profound came up for you that you want to share, let's talk about it. You can find me on Instagram at Things You Can't Unhear, or on my personal page at Maritza_Barone. And if someone you know will benefit from something that was said in this show, make sure you share it with them too. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and keep up to date with what's next. And if you can spare a few seconds, please rate and review the show on iTunes, just so other people can find us more easily and quickly. And as always, my friends, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.